So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and so actually my second attempt to record this particular replay because NVIDIA is laughably incompetent, but fortunately for me it's a replay that I'm actually very interested in because it's a new custom scenario made by DF Morris. It's always interesting to see new people creating scenarios. We've already seen one of his, which was the Siege free-for-all hybrid that we saw with Dorwinion trying to defend against three different teams of elves. This one is a little bit more conservative, I would say, in terms of its conventional. It's probably the better word for it, in terms of how it's set up, because it is more of a regular siege. However, with all of the different battles that are going to be happening strewn across the field, it does still have a unique air to it. And the theme of this one is that we are in the foothills of the Misty Mountains, the goblins setting up this little ramshackle encampment so that they can acquire some new weapons potentially from their allies to the south in Isengard and to the north in Angmar. Isengard bringing their black powder, Angmar bringing their sorceries, and who knows what mischief the goblins could get up to with such weapons in tow. The map itself is also quite interesting. We have this open space here in the middle where the encampment is. This will be the primary defensive position for the orcs and goblins today, who will be on the defence, as the elves and the dwarves try to stop these weapons falling into goblin hands and more havoc being wrought. So there are several large entrances into the encampment itself, but there is also going to be some action on the periphery of the map as well, skirmishing between different places where they're going to be ambushing, as well as the primary assault to the encampment, which will be happening from this side. Other than that, not an awful lot. Plenty of places as well for the defenders to get into good skirmishing positions with nice high plateaus for their units to get onto, which will be necessary because the elves and dwarves will of course have the advantage as it pertains to quality, and so they're going to need their support, the orcs and the goblins, in place if they are to be successful here in this 4v4 siege scenario. Starting off with the two Lothlorien armies that will be marching in from the east. Their role in this fight is quite simple really. They just need to move forward and attack the eastern edge of the camp. This will be the primary assault on the encampment really, because the other two attacking armies will be elsewhere on the field doing their own thing before moving in on the encampment, whereas Lothlorien have got a much more straight shot at it. Lothlorien should be pretty good as well. It's the Misty Mountains are the ones that are manning the encampment exclusively at the start, and stuff like the Lothlorien warriors here should be really good at dealing with them. They should be good at dealing with the orcs in general. Most orcs get all of their survivability from any armour they may have, and the Lothlorien warriors will crack right on through that. So the goblins will really struggle at dealing with units such as this on the front. Just in behind we've got some Lothlorien Swordmasters as well. They don't have the armour piercing, but they do have a higher base damage, so it's nice to have both because the Lothlorien Swordmasters will be better against certain opponents. And then the more defensive of Lorien's heavier units, the Lothlorien Spearmen. They are of course shielded. Lorien's armour is pretty good as well. It's not as high as Imladris's, but it's not too far behind. And so Lothlorien Spearmen can be really good at holding on to the front, as can the Lothlorien Axemen, but those axes give them a little bit more bite as well, which generally speaking is a good thing against the orcs, because again, they won't be able to match you in terms of melee defense anyway, so you may as well go for a little bit extra in terms of your damage. Carascaladon's Guardians, as the battle wears on, could also be such an important unit for Lorien. Late game pikes are usually very strong, but the Carascaladon's Guardians in particular, because their stats are actually pretty good, but also that second hit point of theirs makes them so difficult to kill from the front if you just have melee units left to you and you're unable to flank them. Spears of the Wood in the auxiliary as well. They're much lighter than the other units that are in front of them, but they should still be able to fight against equivalent orc units relatively easily, but they do need to be a little bit more careful because enemy skirmishers will have an easier time at burning through them. Lothlorien Axemen there. We also have some cavalry over on this side, Riders of the Golden Wood, one of the better, if not the best, horse archer unit in the game. Silverthorn arrows, really good in melee. Be interesting to see how the mobility of Lorien gets utilised here. And then we also have some Lorien archers, which will be really good in the skirmish. So again, the defender's going to have to really make good use of their superior positioning, because if it just comes down to a straight skirmish fight, especially against someone like Lothlorien with their damage, you're going to be in trouble. Kindred of Caliborn also here with their split shot arrows. And then we have Morris himself, who sent me the battle replay and made the scenario. So a big thank you to him for sending this one in, playing as the second Lorien army. Fairly similar by the looks of things. There's a few different units. There's the Lothlorien warriors, spears and axemen making up the first ranks, the most important part of their army really, because they need to be solid as they move forward. He though has got some Lothlorien mounted company, so it'll be interesting to see how they get used. You can't kite around quite so easily as you can with the Riders of the Golden Wood, but they can be used in conjunction with one another to cover for one another's weaknesses potentially. More of them. He's also got the Golatherium Blademasters, which are effectively just like the Lothlorien Swordmasters, only slightly worse, but they can hide. Hiding is not really going to be terribly useful for Lothlorien on this occasion because they just need to move across an open field to start attacking the encampment. But still, they're still heavier Elven Swordsmen and they should do decently enough. We also have a couple of units of Woodland Protectors. Those javelins could be really useful for breaking up any defensive phalanxes that the Misty Mountains may want to set up in the gap that leads to the encampment. Golatherium Blademasters over there. Watchers of the Golden Wood, Silverthorn arrows on foot. There are also slightly more of them, so they're more useful in melee. We shall see if that comes to pass. Another unit of Karas Galadon's Guardians, and a catapult. The choice of when to use the catapult could be pretty vital here for Morris, because that can be such a useful tool when you're on the attack. And another unit of Kindred of Celeborn as well. The force coming from the north, advancing through the trees, is going to be Chris's Dwarves of Erebor army. Ironfoot Hammer Guard, so another mounted unit. It'd be interesting to see if they can link up with the other cavalry units and have a really robust force. The Hammer Guard in particular are going to be pretty nasty in melee against enemy cavalry that may want to try and engage them. Angmar, Misty Mountains and Isengard have all got really strong melee cavalry options, but the Hammer Guard can give as good as they get. Be interesting if they can be utilised in that fashion. Unupgraded Ironfoot Warriors, so Ironfoot's here on the front with the spears and the warriors. I mean, Dwarven entry-level units are still very, very strong, and they're here in numbers as well, so the Dwarves will be coming in from the north. They have a choice of what they can do. They can either send some units over to support Mirkwood, which are in the west, which we'll get onto in just a moment. They can send some units over to the east to help out Lothlorien, or they can punch right on through to the encampment and attack the encampment from the northern approach as well. So that'll be quite interesting. We've got some Erebor Legionaries and Axeguard of Erebor over here as well, so some higher quality units. The Ironfoot Halberds for a phalanx, that armour piercing is going to be useful against all of the Orc factions today. More spears, axe throwers if they can get into position, of course, really, really deadly. Crossbows, ensuring that the defenders aren't the only ones with a monopoly on this weapon in this battle. And the Ironfoot crossbows, if they can get into a good position, are going to be superior to the offerings from even Isengard, but especially the Misty Mountains, more Axeguard and more Erebor Legionaries. And then the Bodyguard units at the back. The General going to be in the Highborns of Erebor, the most defensive of Erebor's Bodyguard units, very tanky. We'll see how well they can do. One of my favourite units in the game, really, the Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin. Really, really nicely balanced unit. They've got the defensive attributes you'd expect from a shielded Dwarven Bodyguard, but they combine it with that AP that they are known for as well. A pure offensive unit is going to be the Sons of Durin, with their AP on their two-handed hammers. And finally, an army which will be mostly in the trees, it must be said, is going to be Demons. I think this is Demon's Hunter, but he is playing as Mirkwood. He's got some Woodland Realm Patrol that are already opening up. They will be the first ones into the action because they are going to be ambushing the Angmar army as it marches in from the west. So nice. It'd be interesting to see if Mirkwood can finish them off before they arrive at the encampment. The Ents are here. They'll be able to do a lot of damage to individual targets. Hiri Lung unupgraded. Hiri Ek unupgraded. You can tell it's not an Eclipse scenario because he puts armor upgrades on absolutely everything, whereas it seems to be a little bit more sparingly done here in this one. Woodland Protectors. He's also got some Sindar of the Girdle, so another fast-moving unit. One unit of cavalry per attacking army. Sindar of the Girdle, very, very strong, but more fragile than most other Bodyguard cavalry because of their lack of a shield and lower armour. Hiri Lung here again should be pretty good against Angmar. Hiri Ek, if they can get into the faces of the enemy quickly, will also be good as we move through the trees. More Hiri Ek, more Hiri Lung. So yeah, a few of the heavier units. They may have Palace Guard or Elders of the Elven King hidden in amongst the trees as well. But we shall now move on to the defenders, starting off with the army that's right in front of us, who will be ambushed post-haste. We have Buzzard, who is playing as Angmar. He's got his Witch Realm Inquisitors from the front, so they should be able to defend against the Sindar of the Girdle. Be interesting as well if they can be used effectively, because they are melee cavalry, so you can't just go barreling into the front of Mirkwood infantry and expect it to go too well for you. Rear charging is a different matter, but Mirkwood have got the drop on you, so that'll be more difficult to do. Something else that you can do to help hold the front line, however, is deploy your heavy infantry. While you won't beat Mirkwood outright with the Gundabad Guard and the Guardians of Kharn, their defensive attributes means that you will still be able to hold the line for a good amount of time and use your other tools to try and weather the storm, although I think Angmar will need a little bit of support from the encampment and potentially from the Isengard reinforcements from the south if they are to have much success here, because they will have the drop on the Mirkwood will have the drop on them. Upgraded Guardians of Kharn can hold the line for a good long time though, so they should be able to buy plenty of time for some reinforcements to arrive. Witchhelm Scourge Raiders will be a good target for the Mirkwood archers, especially unupgraded as they are. The armor upgrade gives them a helmet. Throwing axes will be really useful for doing some pretty serious damage to the more lightly armoured Mirkwood force. They are the most lightly armoured force on the field today, especially without their upgrades. Also another good target for the Mirkwood archers, however, will be the Witchhelm Pikemen. Armour upgraded, yes, so they will be a little bit more resilient, but still, like, they're still unshielded, and they're still one of the better choices you can pick in the Angmar roster, because they are so robust with armour and shields, generally speaking. Blackwatch Legion, not sure when the right time to commit them will be. I mean, they can withstand an incredible amount of arrow fire with their armour and their massive shield value, but I don't know if sending them into melee with Mirkwood is such a good idea. You may want to save this unit for later, as, of course, the Witchers should be. The Witchers will really need to stay in and amongst the army, otherwise they will be focused down surely by Mirkwood missiles, or the Sindar the Girdle will try and get a cheeky charge onto them. The Bodyguard units and the Trolls are at the back, with the Witchram Hammerguard and the Witchram Blackguard over here, and then a couple of units of the Trolls of Gundabad as well. So that's how you know it's a scenario, because normally you'd see the Trolls of Angmar alongside them, but 2 units of Trolls of Gundabad, which is pretty neat. But yeah, overall a pretty robust Angmar army as you'd expect. There could be hidden units around here as well, because that doesn't look like maybe a unit of Snaga archers or something, just to round things off, I would imagine. Now into the encampment, 2 Misty Mountains armies ready to receive their gifts. Froggy has got some heavy goblin crossbows, heavy goblin spears back here as well. We've also got a couple of units of cave trolls in here, which could be really, really useful potentially. We have got some heavy goblin crossbows, some black uruks of the mountains. Some white Uruk Fearmongers will be really useful against the heavily armoured dwarves in particular. Mountain Uruk Host, which are a good unit of line infantry. They'll be able to hold the line for longer as a result of having them. More Fearmongers, more Mountain Uruk Host. A pretty high quality Misty Mountains army, this at the core of the defence. A couple of units of them. Goblin King's Bodyguard, which is where Azog is, unsurprisingly. We've got some black Uruks of the mountains back over there. Possibly blackbacks, but they can of course hide, so it's a little bit more difficult to see. Drake Broodlings could go forth and try and disrupt the Lorien advance. Something else which will worry the Lorien advance is the Orc Mangonel, especially with the positions the defenders have to put that in. Then we have Tundra's Fox, who's got a couple of units of Black Uruks back here, some Goblin King's Bodyguard, very similar army by the looks of things. 2 Cave Trolls once again, based around a core of Mountain Uruk Host, heavy Goblin Spears. Difference being he's got Drake Broodlings as well, but he does have a unit of Bolg's Champions, which are a little bit more conventional cavalry. More so than the Drake Broodlings are, which are a little bit more of a strange unit. There's probably some hidden units in and around here as well. Mountain Orc Berserkers can hide, Blackbacks can hide, and there's a few other elements of the Misty Mountains army that can also hide. Last, but by no means least, bringing their gift of black powder to their allies, we have Dabba Duba, who is playing as Isengard. Lurt's Hunting Pack, giving the defenders access to some body-piercing projectiles on the defence, which is always very, very useful. Nazkai, Uruk-hai Berserkers and Guards of Orthanc, and the Trolls of the White Hand and the Champions of the White Hand, rounding off all of the high-tier Isengard tools that they can bring to bear, and the rest of the army I think is more rank and file, with Uruk-hai Infantry, a very good all-round unit of line infantry that. Several units actually of Uruk-hai Pikemen, 4 units of them, which could be really good in the late game. We've got some half-orc Baneguard for a bit of punch, a couple of units of Uruk-hai crossbows at the back, and of course, for flavour, the fire of Orthanc, black powder. So, without further ado, let's begin, and we will be starting off over here, as you can already hear the cries of Iladan from the trees, and surely we are going to see, yes indeed we are, a few hits coming into the side of the Guardians of Kharn, but Angmar won't mind that too much. Guardians of Kharn, a solid unit of infantry. It's on the sides with the shields as well, but Angmar will need to pivot and turn to meet Mirkwood as they break from the tree line, surely. Leading the way with those units of Hiri Ek, which will be able to hold the line, flanking around by the looks of things with the Hiri Lang, which I'd quite like to see. And surely there were other hidden units as well from Mirkwood that we missed, like Woodland Realm Axemen, more Woodland Realm Patrol and the like. And now you can see Angmar. They do have some Goblin Trackers, they do have some Archers that they can use in response to the Mirkwood pressure. They're not going to win a skirmish fight, of course, they're just going to need to try and withstand the initial Mirkwood onslaught and hope that their allies send. I mean, their allies have got plenty of cavalry, to be honest, so reinforcements should be forthcoming, you would think. They have trolls. there are the Heary Lung. The trolls look like they're making a beeline for the Heary Lung. I'm not sure if that's the best of ideas, without support anyway. If they send some infantry and support, it's a different matter, but stuff like the Heary Lung, shock infantry like that, should be pretty good. And I'm actually quite surprised to see Mirkwood turn their back on the trolls here. I mean, there's some Woodland Realm Axemen breaking from the trees as well. With all their numbers here, especially with the kind of units that they are, they should be absolutely fine when it comes to overwhelming these trolls. More Woodland Realm Axemen arriving from the side. We are sending over a unit of Gundabad Guard, but more reinforcements will be necessary if they are to bail out these trolls. They'll do some decent damage from the initial charge because for some reason Demons here turned his back on the troll charge, which is not the best of ideas, but they should stabilise in this fight, and Angmar will need to send over more than a singular unit of Gundabad Guard if they are to have any sort of success. The Ents are on the way over. This is a very questionable choice. I mentioned in the army composition phase that the Witch Realm Inquisitors probably shouldn't just be barrelling into the front of Mirkwood infantry, least of all the Heary heavy elven spears, because their charge will be reflected pretty effectively, and yeah, it's not the best of ideas that, but he is going to cycle out there pretty quickly. Barrow White's taking some hits from the Woodland Protectors. The Angmar infantry taking a bit of a beating here, so far so good for Mirkwood. They do need to do this damage quickly before any potential reinforcements arrive. Sindar of the Girdle charging in, not the best of charges, bit of a love tap onto the Guardians of Khandu. Way more actually being sent over here, including the Blackwatch Legion and the Witch Realm Blackguard, which is, so they really do want to help these trolls out, and with the Witch Realm Inquisitors in there as well, to be fair, this could be enough to turn this fight around. There are Ents in here as well, with another unit of Elven Swordsmen on the way, so it's a tricky situation, this. Neither side is going to come out of that smelling of roses, to be sure. And then over here, still the Javelins and now the Greenwood Watchers with their throwing daggers being utilised very, very nicely. Also the throwing axes, however, being utilised. But one thing I have noticed over there, Champions of the White Hand on the way over. So the defenders getting over to support Angmar more quickly than the attackers can get over to support Mirkwood. And these Champions of the White Hand will be a real menace because they are going to flatten these Greenwood Watchers, which is a real shame because these Greenwood Watchers are in a good position, doing a lot of damage to the core of the Angmar force. But you can see there, those mounted Nazkai, well, that is what they are, barreling through the Greenwood Watchers, and the Hammer Guard are over on this side now. So it looked pretty grim initially for Angmar, but they are stabilising. Angmar, of course, got a solid front line, more than enough to get reinforcements to them. Meanwhile, just in time to see a Mangonel shot, eh? Well, it would have been if not for that little movie. Thranduil dying to Goblin Trackers of all things. How embarrassing. In fact, let's go down to half speed for now, because with things getting underway on multiple fronts at this point, it does make a good deal of sense. So the Mangonel's in a really nasty position. Heavy Goblin Crossbows are also up there. So Lothlorien is an interesting situation, this. With the amount of quality they have in their infantry, they should be able to tear the Misty Mountains front line asunder. Yes, there's some decent Misty Mountains units on the front line, but they can't hold a candle to a full complement, or two full complements really, of heavy Lothlorien units. So it's going to be a tricky situation in melee. However, the support coming in from the crossbows and the Mangonel could turn that around. The Mangonel, however, is an unwieldy beast. If one of those shots goes awry and it tags your front line as the Misty Mountains, you're far more likely to do damage to yourselves in terms of morale, more so than the elves. In come the Bolgs Champions, getting a decent little charge there into the Lothlorien Axemen. Not leading the way with spears could be considered a bit of a mistake. At least most of the way there, and then maybe you swap over to something like the two-handed Axeman to get the full benefit of the higher charge bonus of that particular unit. But Lothlorien Axeman taking some decent damage there, not crippling, but a nice little tag there from the Bolgs Champions as they move back behind the relative safety of their front line. That Mountaineer Coast is actually pointing the wrong way, and they will surely be made to pay for that by the Lothlorien Axeman. Meanwhile, let's head back over to the other side and see how this ambush is getting on. Not that great by the looks of things. Champions of the White Hand rolling through the Woodland Realm Patrol that were getting in behind enemy lines to try and stop the Angmar skirmishers, mainly the Scourge Raiders, from doing their thing. The Hammer Guard are over here now though as well. So the Dwarves coming over to support Mirkwood. Better late than never. And it wasn't that much later, to be fair, but Champions of the White Hand really got here just in time to save Angmar. These Goblin Trackers will probably end up routing. Not the most deadly unit, but you really do need to be cleaning up the backlines of Angmar here, and then worrying about other things later. More reinforcements from the defenders coming over here though. This is the benefit of having so many fast movers. The Drake Broodlings from Froggy coming over here, and that could be a real problem. Woodland Protectors are already routing which is a bad sign. You can see here the Witchram Hammerguard are now wrapping up the Mirkwood front line. Mirkwood's front line is decent enough, but this is where Demons, I think, has gone a little bit wrong. He's split up his fully defensive units over here facing off against Angmar, which aren't going to be able to do the damage quickly enough to the Gundabad Guard, Guardians of Kharndoom and the Barrow Wights. All of his aggressive units are over here, and that's a little bit too homogenised here. And also he allowed Angmar to actually pull out wide with his trolls, and he's stretched the engagement a lot. What you really wanted to be doing as Mirkwood, I think, was condensing the fight as much as possible rather than making it wide. Because now you have the problem that the Orc numbers, especially with the Orc fast-moving cavalry and, I'm not sure what you would call the Drake Broodings, they're technically cavalry, but they're a very weird cavalry unit. It's a problem for Mirkwood, and this ambush could end in failure, which is not the best of starts for the attackers. It's not the end of the world, because the quality of the Dwarven and Elven armies that are going to be attacking the encampment quickly are such that it may not actually matter what happens over here, but it's definitely better for the defenders that Angmar wins this and then is able to bring some of their tools to bear later on. We haven't actually seen the Witches yet. They've been kept relatively safe in and amongst the Scourge Raiders. There hasn't... I mean, Mirkwood haven't fallen apart either, so you'd have to say that the Witches haven't used any of their volleys yet, but Mirkwood in trouble, potentially. The Dwarves, meanwhile, emerging from the trees from which they've been marching through. Bit of dead cavalry over here, but you can see there is some Riders of the Goldenwood coming back over here. This is a thick defence over here, headed up by Isengard. Bit of support from the Misty Mountains that were already here in the encampment as well. Going to be tough for the Dwarves, that. Numbers favour the Orcs, but quality does favour the Dwarves. They don't really have an answer for stuff like the Dragon Slayers individually, but I mean, we'll see. It could be that the Dwarves actually need some support from Mirkwood in order to make that push work. But the Dwarves, it looks like they're going to punch right on through, even though I would probably urge caution in this situation. It's not going all that smoothly for the attackers across the field so far. Lothlorien, it's going fine, but it's not going very well for Mirkwood. So you do need to keep an eye on that. Meanwhile, over here, javelins being utilised. We've got to be very careful with that mangonel. They do get a... Yeah, that's fully in and amongst the elves, and that is actually enough to rout the spears of the wood. So a good hit there from the mangonel. Got to be very, very careful with that sort of thing. This also, crossbows are over on this side of the line. Lothlorien struggling because of all the support from the mangonel and from the crossbows. You can see though Lothlorien recognised the threats that these heavy goblin crossbows are, and those Lothlorien archers firing in there, leaving a blanket of goblin corpses. In come the cave trolls, and this is a good opportunity actually. The centre of this line, a combination of the mangonel and crossbow fire, leaving Lothlorien very understrengthed here in the middle, and it gives these cave trolls a chance to break through the line, get into the backfield of Lothlorien and interrupt their skirmishes, and that is a lot of cave trolls that are moving forward. That there are Silverthorn arrows, and they're firing into the crossbow support. To absolutely no one's surprise, cave trolls are going to move forward, and this is a problem for Lothlorien. They do still have some units a little bit further back, including some pikes and the catapult that you have to keep in mind. Oof, there goes another hit from the mangonel, again hitting Lothlorien. Very fortuitous so far from the mangonel. Sometimes it really doesn't cooperate with you in that way, but Froggy has managed to get the best. Well, the showering fire projectiles of the exploding in midair hasn't materialised, but he's essentially been using it a bit like a budget catapult at this point in time, which is exactly what he needs. Just doing some damage, letting the elves know that they can feel fear as well. And with the cave trolls in behind enemy lines, the elves aren't even going to be able to lay down their own support as effectively as they would like, especially against these Woodland Protectors. That is a really good fight for them to take. You can see there the dwarves are about to charge into melee, but as we zoom over to the other side, an important fight here between... Yeah, and it's really going poorly for Mirkwood. They've done damage to Angmar, but Angmar weathered the initial storm very, very well. And in the end, it was because the defenders came to the aid of Angmar that Angmar is still going to be able to play a role in this fight as we move forward. Mirkwood, on the other hand, the only support they really got was one unit of cavalry from the dwarves. I think Lothlorien's cavalry needed to be over here as well, really. Lothlorien's cavalry not too useful over on the other side so far, and that has proven to be a real difference maker. There's still some Hiri Lang left alive, and they may very well be able to finish off the Blackwatch Legion, not the best in melee. It's not a complete loss this for the attackers, but they will still be disappointed that their ambush was unsuccessful and that Angmar will be able to go into the encampment as well and help shore things up against the dwarves and Lothlorien over on the other side. And there we go, routing Woodland Realm Axemen. The Hiri Lan will not be too far behind, and I believe the Witches are still alive as well. I don't know actually, where are they? Throwing axes being used on the Hiri Axe. Should probably conserve some of that ammunition at this point. Buzzard, no need to commit any more to this fight. Victory already assured. Nope, there are the Witches, and they have taken damage, and in fact there is some Greenwood Watchers trying to kill them off, so they have taken a bit of damage. Mirkwood did their best to try and finish them off, but in the end, not to be. The Dwarves now. They are going all in by the looks of things. This is pretty much the entirety of the Dwarf host. The support just back beyond the hillside as well. More cave trolls over here. Will they try and do the same thing they did to Lothlorien to the Dwarves? The Dwarves have got fewer projectiles to try and silence, but they could still be absolutely vital. And this Dwarven front line, very, very good in terms of quality, but the numbers here, and it's not exactly a poor quality defensive line either. The Uruk-hai taking the lead over here, but also some Misty Mountains forces ready to come in should the need arise, and the pikemen going to be able to keep those halberds at bay. More of an emphasis over on this side of things by the looks of things. The Sons of Durin are over here, the Highborns of Erebor are over here, and the Dragon Slayers, so clearly he's going to try and overload one flank, and this is the one he has selected. The rest is just going to be trying to hold them in place, which the dwarves are renowned for being good at, you must say. Iron for Axe Throwers getting into position now. Will they be able to get some good volleys? The crossbows are also getting in here. Iron for Axe Throwers jostling for position. We shall go back over there momentarily. Meanwhile, still pouring through with more of these units through the gap that they made. Drake Broodlings now in behind enemy lines. Now, they need to keep moving, because if they don't, they're going to get torn apart by some of the more aggressive Lothlorien units in melee, such as the Watchers of the Golden Wood. Oof. Another really fortuitous hit there from the Mangonel. So often we see the Mangonel be the doom of the Misty Mountains, really. But on this occasion it has, if not been spectacular, it's been reliable, which is the last thing you expect from a unit like that. Elsewhere, though, in the backfield, the Cave Trolls have been brought to heel, but they did a good thing. They pushed forward. I like that aggression, silencing a lot of the Lothlorien skirmishers for an extended period of time, giving that front line the opportunity to hold on for longer, giving the crossbows the opportunity to fire for longer, given that they aren't being filled with arrows. Having said that, we are starting to see the Misty Mountains run a little bit lighter on numbers on the front line. Some more Black Uruks being committed in, but Misty Mountains showing signs of wear and tear on the front line, as you would expect when they're going up against a heavy-duty Lothlorien army. But Blackback's also being committed, so eager to hold on to this front line. They've done a pretty good job so far. Loredan spears are pushing forward. White Uruk Fearmongers routing. A miss there from the Mangonel. But such is the way of things. Meanwhile, Ironfoot crossbows. Here come some Trolls of the White Hand. Some Ironfoot halberds. I mean, it is a real slogfest, this. The quality is in favour of the dwarves, but you'd have to say as well, there just isn't enough of them in certain areas of the line. And some of the entry-level dwarven units, Erebor not having quite the same stoutness of heart that their brethren from Khazad-dûm have, but even so, like, Ironfoot warriors starting to rout. There's just too many numbers on the front line, and they are, by the looks of things, going to try to be aggressive. I would assume they're going to try and pull through the Axe Guard with the Trolls, because that's not really a fight that the Trolls of the White Hand are going to want to take. That is a lot of Uruk-hai and Mountain Uruks in the way of these dwarves, and I just don't think they had the numbers to come barreling through and try and attack full on. I mean, I can appreciate the aggression, but they were just too well prepared for this. And it may have behooved Erebor to try and go in and help Mirkwood more, go more all in on saving Mirkwood, and then worry about the encampment later. Dwarven infantry is quite incredibly slow, of course, but even still. There's also heavy goblin spears in here offering their AP. They are getting their trolls in behind enemy lines, getting into these Iron for Axe Throwers. This support would have been vital for the dwarves to keep this assault up, with the trolls behind enemy lines making that more difficult though. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. Meanwhile, there is, I think, That's a bad sign for the dwarves as well. Uruk-hai crossbowmen getting ready to get into position. They can't really hit the most important part of the dwarven army down here, but they can finish off the rest, and then that would mean that the dwarves are going to get wrapped up, which more and more it's looking like if the attackers are to have victory here, it will be built on the back of the Lothlorien effort, because Mirkwood already gone. Erebor, it's not looking great for them. But the Misty Mountains, they are holding on, but Lorien, the momentum is starting to shift more and more in favour of the elves here in the eastern approach to the encampment. And you can see that this front line is largely non-existent at this point, the elves getting in behind enemy lines, getting into the faces of the heavy goblin crossbowman. And silencing them is absolutely vital, because they will have been one of the most effective tools. Another hit from the mangonel, but another hit that just collides with the floor, so we still haven't seen the firework-esque, like the Roman candle-like raining fire that the mangonel is known for. Perhaps that's for the best for the Misty Mountains, though, considering the havoc that can wreak. Lornan Spearmen moving around the flank. Golatherium Blademasters. Defeat seems certain for them, which is quite surprising. Lorien still have plenty of archers, which may yet be something which really does help them. You can see there as well, doing damage to more Misty Mountains reinforcements as they try to get over here to salvage the situation for the defenders. Black Uruks of the mountains. If there's one thing the Misty Mountains has, it's plenty of numbers they can keep throwing into a lost cause. Angmar is taking an awfully long time to reinforce their allies. They are over here, finally, like, completely victorious, I guess, but they have been very, very slow on the uptake here, which is probably for the better of the game, because if they were pretty quick over here, the dwarves would already be in horrid difficulties. More Ironfoot warriors continue to rout. The Uruk-hai crossmen going to be raining death down upon them. Guards of Orthanc pushing through the lines. Normally the dwarves would be quite good against that sort of unit, but at this point the momentum well and truly with the forces of evil. A lot of trolls in here, a lot of them getting caught up on units like Isengard of Erebor, which won't be great for their longevity, but they're going to be doing damage as well, the trolls. And at this point, they may as well. I like how aggressive they've been with their trolls in this battle, the defenders. No complaints about how they've used them whatsoever. Maybe the trolls have been bad making a beeline for the Hiri Land early on, but that ended up working out because of the shape of how Mirkwood approached that ambush. Otherwise, though, the cave trolls, the trolls to the White Hand, being used aggressively to get through enemy front lines and then silence supporting skirmishers, and then you allow your numerous and heavily armoured front lines to grind the enemy down. Going quite well for the dwarves over on this flank, though. Cave trolls not able to get through the sheer amount of heavy infantry they've laid on for them. So the dwarves have one section of line where they're not doing too badly, but I mean, they surely won't last for too much longer. That's the problem here that the dwarves will surely have. So it is going to come more and more down to whether Lorien can do the business. Goblin King's bodyguard, including one of the Misty Mountains generals. That's one way you can get the Misty Mountains out of the way pretty quickly. When they lose their general, they're much more susceptible to big routs. Goblin King's bodyguard are also going to get dumpstered by Galadon's Guardians and Swordmasters. Lornan Daxman pushing up the hill to silence this unit of heavy goblin crossbows who are in guard mode, going to try and get as many volleys off as they possibly can. They'll get shredded by the Lornan Daxman, and the addition of the Orc Mangonel crew in support is not going to change that, unfortunately, for them. But Lorien getting their archers in support. The other Misty Mountains general falls as we shift over to that side of the field. That could be the start of some of the Misty Mountains starting to rout off, but the problem is for Lorien now, they're going to start to see a ton of reinforcements come their way. Angmar's still a long way from the front line, but Isengard are going to make their way over here. Eventually Angmar will make their way over here. I wonder why they were so slow. Could it have been a rule, or was it just a conscious decision to be that slow? Black Uruks of the Mountains trying to hold back the Lorien momentum. I mean, they are one of the Misty Mountains units which is best suited for fighting the elves, because they actually do have some melee defense, but the difference in quality is still quite stark, you would have to say. Pushing forward now as well, the Galadon's Guardians. The other unit, this one from Morris, I think, yes indeed. He's going to push in. Where did that catapult go? It is over there. He hasn't used the catapult yet, but then there hasn't really been a blob. Like, once they gain the upper hand, it's turned into a much more scattered affair. I'll have to wait and see what happens there. Snow trolls moving across, better in sustained combat, going after the Lorinand archers. They can look after themselves in melee, the Lorinand archers, but they won't want to be in melee with snow trolls, to be sure. Uruk-hai, what are they firing at? I wonder what section of line. More routing from the Ironfoot units, not quite up to the task on this occasion. More ripping shots into the backs of the units that they can see. The Erebor legionaries will stick around in melee for far longer. There are actually some Mirkwood units that were hidden that came over here to try and support the dwarves, but nowhere near enough, and this kind of unit in melee is not going to be enough to reverse Erebor's fortunes at this point. So Mirkwood's still technically a presence on the field, but it didn't go very well for them in this fight. I think the way that Erebor and Mirkwood have interplayed with one another, like both sides maybe should have had a better idea of what they were going to do, rather than being more insular in what their approach was and only sending one another very limited reinforcements. Maybe a rethink there was necessary, because neither side has really done what they would have been hoping for. Angmar are damaged, Isengard will ultimately be damaged because of the sheer quality that the dwarves are bringing to bear. These champions of the White Hand have been used really, really well by Dabaduba. Haven't seen that username before, but clearly he's played the game before, because he's done really rather nicely. And now Isengard's starting to wrap up the line as well. This is the real strong point of the Dwarven force still. There's quite a lot of Ironfoot spears. There's Ironfoot halberds still alive. The Sons of Durin, which are a bit of a nightmare for a lot of these basic Uruk-hai units, or more basic Uruk-hai units, to deal with. Their well-made Isengard plate, no match at all for those Dwarven hammers. Ironfoot spears are routing. Trolls of the White Hand might get a rear charge, which could be enough to rout those Ironfoot spears. Starting to see that's just more routing. Witchram Inquisitors are padding their kill count a little bit, I see. Going after units that are routing. You may as well, though, because it's just on the way. But Buzzard and his Angmar force is now finally moving. And that is just more bad news for the attackers, as the Angmarim will also join in. So far, you would say that the defenders have played certainly well enough to win this fight. The interplay between them has been much more fluid than that between the attackers, but Lorien still forward momentum. Still doing quite nicely for themselves. Split shot projectiles colliding with the half-orc Baneguard, who are also not going to do too well against Lorinand warriors in melee. The numbers favour them, but with Watchers of the Golden Wood arriving, that won't go too well for them either. You can see over here the Lorinand archers continuing the fight, continuing to do a good job actually against these snow trolls. Bloodied up, depleted. Moving further up, Goblin King's bodyguard is still here, so Froggy's general still lives, even if Tundra's does not. Blackback Mountain Berserkers are over here, but they are being held very competently at arm's length by the Karas Galadon's Guardians. More snow trolls have actually pushed their way up here, but Kindred of Celeborn and Lorinand Axemen should be more than sufficient to finish them off. And the Riders of the Golden Wood still have a bit of ammunition going after the Uruk-hai crossbowmen that are further into the encampment itself, and doing tons of damage to them as well. They do need to shut those crossbows down. If they allow more armour-piercing missiles to come their way, then the slim chances Lorien will have at turning this battle around for their team will start to evaporate ever more so. Still some Spears of the Wood involved as well, which is quite surprising. Meanwhile, units routing all over the place. It looks like there's a sea of blue arrows over here, but that's just because there's so many very depleted routing units going back to the trees from whence they came. Erebor well and truly being sent packing. Woodland Round Patrol doing their best in melee, but against dedicated Uruk-hai infantry, it isn't going to go very well for them. Goblin's going to try and finish them off as well, and Angmar should be arriving momentarily as well. There is the Fire of Orthanc. The goods, the illicit goods that are being traded today. Yes, and there we can see a troll charge in the distance. This is still an area where Erebor can be very useful for their team. Well, I say that as the Erebor general dies, but the bodyguard tier units they have over here can still get some kills and buy time for Lorien to continue to try and destroy what's left of the Misty Mountains and the Isengard reinforcements they have over there. The more of that they can do, the better, because if the whole of the defending force collapsed on Lothlorien right now, they wouldn't win. But if they can split that up, stretch it out a little bit, then they may yet have a chance. Based on their quality, a lot of breaking and fighting to the death, caused by the charging in of those trolls. Trolls of the White Hand doing a very good job. The armour piercing is also here. The Nazkai are in here, which is also going to hasten the demise of Erebor. Some of these trolls are dying, which is not too surprising either, because of the quality of units they're going after. Woodland Realm Patrol almost routing. This unit of Lurt's hunting pack in position. Those body-piercing projectiles will be very useful. As will the split shots, though. The Blood Mist rises. Mountain Uruk host routing from Tundra's Fox as well. His army probably on its last legs, especially when you consider his general's gone. Morale-wise, it's probably not looking great. Uruk-hai Berserkers, victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. That'll be a nice spike of damage for the Orcs on the front line. There are the Lornard warriors. There's cavalry in behind the lines as well, going after, I would assume, skirmishes. Yeah, heavy goblin crossbows broken. Uruk-hai crossbows probably not going to be too far behind. They're going to try and rout those fearmongers. They could be successful there. Need to be careful though when they do. Fortunate, because if those fearmongers did turn around, very devastating attacks to cavalry. Blackback is going to try and get out of there, try and get a rear charge here into the archers and spears of the wood. But they're just going to end up getting surrounded in turn. Here is Froggy's general, surely not going to last too much longer with all of these Lothlorien axemen encroaching on him. He's not bloodied yet though. Well, he actually flees. There goes the Isengard general as well. So that's interesting. Froggy's general and Isengard general both falling by the wayside. So all of a sudden the morale situation for the Orcs on the front line, at least until Angmar arrive here, could be pretty flaky. And that could be the way in which we start to get back into things here for the attackers. Could it be? It'll be an impressive turnaround, you would have to say. Highborns of Erebor, they're up in the business still. 17 of them still remain. There's a lot of broken and fighting to the death units, which are just holding up these valuable reinforcements from going to engage with Lothlorien. Speaking of valuable reinforcements, what on earth are Angmar doing? I know that we've been on half speed, but my goodness, they have been very, very slow on the uptake to reinforce their allies. Just generally, the Fire of Orthanc, they're going to leave their black powder just sort of parked up here. They are, of course, berserkers in melee, so they should still be very, very useful. They're wielding their swords one-handed, because that's just how... I guess that's the effect of spending all your time breathing in black powder if you're an Uruk-hai. Only makes you stronger. Karas Galadon's Guardians going pike to pike with the Uruk-hai pikemen, and the Uruk-hai pikemen are already wavering, not looking good for them. With the support from those Lurt's hunting pack, there's hope for them yet. Mountain Uruk host are routing. I thought they were actually getting in behind enemy lines. Still, the catapult hasn't been used, and we are actually going to see it used finally. Really good opportunity this for Lothlorien to start making some real headway, because any hit they make should rout the units that are over here. Angmar with their general still there is a different matter, but Isengard, and especially anything left from the Misty Mountains, if they get hit by that catapult, almost certainly are they going to rout. There you can see the Blackback Mountain Berserkers that are over here, completely surrounded, getting dealt with. They're not a particularly tanky bodyguard unit, they're very, very damaging, but then there goes Froggy's general, as he was trying to run, ran down. Blackbacks will continue to fight to the bitter end, but anything else, probably not going to be too eager. And this unit of Riders of the Golden Wood has been used quite effectively, you would have to say, by Inarius. There's still the wide swings of the trolls over in the distance, as still the dwarves continue to be an annoyance. And I think now the Orcs see they need to get all of the units they can over to fight Lothlorien, because the longer this goes on, the more of a chance Lothlorien have of making the comeback. Stuff like the Nazkai are absolutely going to be useful. The Angmarim as well need to get a bit of a shift on. Witch Realm Pikemen will be very handy. The Fire of Orthanc crew making their way across. But yeah, I mean, we'll go back up to 1 speed, I think, at this point, because at this stage it's much easier to keep track of everything across the field. Rise of the Goldenwood charging in, and you have to say Lothlorien have done really quite well for themselves over here. It's not over yet. And can Lothlorien make a remarkable comeback a reality? Given the fate of Mirkwood in particular, I mean, it could be like the domino effect as Mirkwood lose, which causes Erebor to lose, which ultimately causes Lothlorien to lose, but Lothlorien doing their best to try and make sure that is not the case. Really nasty javelin fire coming in here to hit the fearmongers, which could cause them to rout. Froggy's losing his general, much of his army in tatters. The Misty Mountains themselves looking a bit thin on the ground at this stage, playing hosts for their allies. There might not be many of them left. In come the Lothlorien warriors trying to get in and amongst the fearmongers. Those big armour-piercing swings now travelling in both directions. Pike's trying to shore up the line, but they really do need to get some... unify their reinforcements a little bit more. That catapult has been quite indecisive at this point, I think. They need to get it into a position where it can shoot, and constantly making small adjustments will make the Medieval 2 pathfinding for siege equipment take its toll on you. So you do need to be a bit more decisive with your artillery to use it effectively. Karas Galadon's Guardians pushing onto the front line, the Uruk-hai Berserkers losing their hit points, which will make them far more fragile here as we enter into the late game. In come the Rise of the Goldenwood, consistently a threat, although this time barreling through the back of their own Woodland Protectors, so the charge not really hitting. There are more of them than the Witch-Realm Inquisitors though, so they shouldn't be too concerned. That Uruk-hai infantry taking a bit of a close range charge as well. Riders of the Goldenwood doing very, very nicely. And there we can see as well the split shot projectiles hitting into the Mountain Uruk host, and also peppering up the Angmar reinforcements. Buzzard's army finally arrives. This is a significant force though. I mean, he still has his witches skulking around somewhere, so you definitely need to keep an eye on that. Lothlorien are doing a good job so far, but that catapult, it needs to start firing sooner rather than later. Trolls the White Hand already very damaged from their escapades against the dwarves, are probably going to fall away pretty quickly here, but they just need to throw everything in and try and break Lothlorien's resolve before Lothlorien can rack up a really good kill count for themselves. That is a ton of damage being done though. 102 Mountain Uruk host routing from Froggy. The Misty Mountains, part of this army, not doing so well. 53 Uruk-hai pikemen. Could Angmar's slow march be the reason for Lothlorien's recovery? Got to ask the question, I think. There are the witches though, and catapult crews coming in. Good hit there into the Guardians of Khan Doom, but the witches are here. You can see the Riders of the Goldenwood are trying to stop the witches, I think. I mean, if the witches are seen, they should be using all of their Kindred of Caliborn to try and burn them down quickly. They're already bloodied after all from their engagement against Mirkwood earlier on. Seems like a distant memory now, but they're too busy focusing on the Witch-Realm Scourge Raiders. That's a good hit onto the pikemen there. A miss from the witches. And the Riders of the Goldenwood stopping them, but there goes another hit. That hits centre mass. It's not too devastating, but they won't want to see too much more of that. That's a much more devastating hit right into the centre of the Elven line, and when you're seeing this, it's systematic at this point. They saw them, but they saw them too late. They knew they were there though from the Riders of the Goldenwood, so I'm really confused as to why they didn't retarget their Kindred of Caliborn to the Witches. They have, but it's a bit too late now. You can see how quickly they fall away, but it was only 1.5 rounds of volleys, which I think has made it now a very tall ask for Lothlorien to win this. The solidity of their force here was what they were basing their hopes on. With that damage from the Witches, I'm not sure. Like, they really should have retargeted their Kindred of Caliborn rather than expecting their cavalry to be able to get in there. And Lothlorien may live to rue that mistake. They've done so well to give their team a fighting chance of victory here, Lothlorien, but that may very well be the end. They also need their catapult to be continuing to fire, but the defenders know that, so they sent forward some throwaway units to interrupt them from firing, which the defenders in general have been very, very good at. Getting units through the enemy lines and preventing them from using their support. Against Lothlorien especially, but also against Erebor. Wasn't really terribly necessary against Mirkwood in the end. Uruk-hai infantry and Mountain Uruk host, is this a unit that returned from routing? I mean, they're losing, regardless of what they think there. That was another hit from the Witches as well. Now they're so small as a unit that they went under the radar, and that is going to be enough to cause some of the very depleted unit of Spears of the Wood to rout. But yeah, when Angmar arrived, I mean, they were so slow that it could have, if they arrived much later, Angmar, Lothlorien would have won this fight, I think. But they arrived just about in time. They were cutting it close. They have had to lean on their Witches as well. A bit of a get-out-of-jail-free card for Angmar on this occasion, and indeed for the defenders. Because without those Witches, you have to question whether or not they would have been able to defeat the stuff that Lothlorien still had left. I mean, Lothlorien would have been very reliant still on stuff like the Carascaladon's Guardians. But then again, they did still have the Witchram Scourge Raiders, ripped up as they were by the Kindred of Caliborn. Very interesting fight this. Ups and downs on both sides of the field. Lothlorien did very, very well. I liked the defenders and how they've used their trolls throughout the field as well. And I do think the defenders are worthy victors because of that. They picked their moments to be aggressive and get behind enemy lines. And I think the macro of how the attackers decided to approach things, especially from Erebor and Mirkwood, there was... perhaps they could have rethought that. But, I mean, it's all well and good saying that in hindsight. Erebor, by the time they got to that position, they may have seen Mirkwood falling apart and were like, well, we'll throw everything in and try and bust through that line as quickly as possible to cause some panic. Another shot from the Witches. I mean, nearly getting friendly fire there into the Guardians of Kharndoon. Lothlorien continuing to push forward. What's going on here? Ironfoot Spears returning from routing. Incredible scenes. They get routed immediately by the one remaining Witcher. Oof, look at that. He has done very, very well for himself. I mean, it's been a while actually since we've seen the Witchers perform to standard. I would say that people probably won't be too impressed with the fact that the Witchers were probably the determining factor in the defenders' certain victory. They could very well have been victorious without the Witchers. It would have been very, very close though. And with Carascaladon's Guardians being the linchpin around which Lothlorien were based, especially with catapults and Kindred of Caliborn, you can never be too sure about that, I don't think. We'll never know. But, it does go to show. There goes Haldian, as is customary. Does go to show that you always need to be vigilant against that sort of thing. Kindred of Caliborn, perhaps Lothlorien getting a bit too greedy, hoping to have their cake and eat it too by continuing to shoot the Scourge Raiders with the Kindred of Caliborn for a couple of volleys and hoping their cavalry would be enough to deal. There goes Morris's catapult crew, and that's the end of him. Inarius, the last one left. Perhaps hoping that the cavalry would be enough to kill the Witchers and they could kill the Scourge Raiders as well. It's not worth the risk though. With the devastation the Witchers can cause, you need to make sure, doubly sure. There's still Lorenan spears. Fighting as they are. Close though, definitely within 10%. It probably will be about 7% the difference by the time all is said and done now that the defenders are in the ascendancy and Angmar have got the wind in their sails. I would imagine. Still some units returning from routing as well from Froggy. Ironically still, with those numbers in those heavy goblin units and from the Mountaineer Coast, the Misty Mountains might still be the most numerous army left on the field, even if Angmar has by far the most strength bound up in their units remaining. Isengard very much on their last legs with one champion of the White Hand, 45 guards of Orthanc, all that they have remaining. The finest that Dunland has to offer. This is going to be the final stand of Lothlorien. A single unit of Kindred of Caliborn remaining, who probably got tons of kills, both units of Kindred of Caliborn on this occasion. Probably getting tons of kills, if I had to guess. Defeat. You don't say. Close enough though that if they'd have dealt with those Witchers appropriately, if they'd have used their catapult, well, without the Witchers they would have been able to use their catapult a bit more. Lothlorien absolutely could have turned this fight around. Again, another interesting scenario made by Morris. I hope that he continues to make more of these, especially when the new patch drops as well. Always good to see more people making scenarios. Eclipse has had to shoulder that burden pretty much alone for a little while now. But with Froggy, Morris and potentially others chipping in, long may that sort of thing continue, I say. Still Blackguard left alive. 22 of them. Only 13 Hammer Guards, so they took quite a lot of damage throughout the course of the battle against both Mirkwood and then later on here against Lothlorien. There goes another of the catapults. Still some routing Ironfoot warriors as well. Going to get a rear charge from this guy, Champion of the White Hand. Probably the single most decisive unit on the field actually, because they've been very, very useful against all of the attacking armies today. The Isengard player, not seen his name show up before, but clearly he's played Medieval 2 before, because he definitely knew what he was doing. And the forces of evil victorious it will be. Tired, eh? You've got to love these little nuggets of wisdom that the announcers often provide for you. There's Haldir. Not looking so good for him, is it? Broken and fighting to the death. He's going to go around here, bloodied face. As he just wanders in, accepting his fate. Captured, eh? Hopefully he got captured by the Dunlanders and not the goblins. I would imagine that would probably be a better experience as a captive than being sent into the goblin tunnels. But yes, a very fine battle indeed. Big thank you to Morris for building this scenario and for letting me show it off, and a big thanks to all of the players as well for being a part of this battle replay. Let's see what did the damage for Lothlorien, shall we? 367 on the Kindred of Celeborn, not too surprising. Certainly Lothlorien's archers are really the showstoppers that they have, and they all did very well. Riders of the Goldenwood were pretty decisive as well, both with their bows and at being in melee. A lot of other units getting over 100 kills as well. Lorinard warriors doing nicely, Lorinard archers. A few performing under par, like that unit only getting 5, but I think that was the unit that got absolutely shredded by crossbows and the mangonel. 318 on Karas Galadon's Guardians as well, but them getting grilled by the Witchers late on, whether it was this one or the other armies, Karas Galadon Guardian unit, that was a very key moment in the fight, that. But yeah, decent performance all round. Lothlorien definitely pulling their weight in this fight. 375 on the Watch to the Goldenwood. Slightly less on this unit of Kindred of Celeborn, but still an acceptable amount, especially considering how the fight was going as the battle wore on. Several units getting over 100, a few getting over 200 as well. Lorinard warriors, which is very good for a unit of heavy axemen, because generally speaking they fizzle out before that point. And 194 on those Karas Galadon's Guardians. So this was Morris's army, because he of course had the catapult. Used perhaps a little too late. But then this was a battle of fine margins. The Witchers were decisive. The lack of using the catapult was pretty decisive. All of those things added up to what we saw here. So yeah, very good battle and nonetheless though, and hopefully we will see more of that. Like I said, always good to see new people making scenarios. And then elsewhere, I mean, one thing that it is worth saying as well is that we are going to be seeing the new patch arrive somewhat soon. I mean, to be fair, this battle replay I think is going to be coming out in very early April. For me, it's still February, of course. With the fact that I'm relocating, I'm not really getting... I haven't downloaded the test build of the patch as it is at in my time at the moment. I will do so once I'm all settled in and I've moved and everything is good. But that is something that we are likely to see in the coming weeks and months, and hopefully we will get to see scenarios made on the new patch, just generally stuff from the new patch as well, stuff like the Rovanian being added first and foremost, maybe finally Ered Luin and Dol Guldur. It's been a while since I've even mentioned the new patch really, because it was for ages it was more of a sort of mythical thing that was just in the distance, but it is now actually genuinely being worked on and tested. I could have showed it off at this point actually, but I haven't done so because again, there's a lot going on right now in my life, so relocating is a big deal. So yeah, that will come. That will probably be fairly soon after this replay is done, to be fair. Maybe about 2 weeks, possibly a little more. It kind of depends on when they want me to show it, because I'm really just... It's really up to Kura, I think, when I show things like that. But yeah, that is the sort of thing that we can prepare for. And of course, new content such as that, and new content such as this, new scenarios, as I've always said, I think is the lifeblood of the game. And more is always a good thing for me. But yeah, and for everyone else, of course. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Do keep an eye out for more channel updates and the like, because I will be keeping people informed of the situation as we move forward, mostly via the YouTube community messages that I do. I will do the occasional update video as well, just to really let people know how it's going, and so on and so forth. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.